and the administrations is just fantastic. So I'm excited to be here and excited to introduce our keynote speaker, Jennifer Homendy. She's the 15th chair of the National Transportation Safety Board. Chair Homendy was sworn in after being unanimously confirmed, and we all know how hard that is, by the U.S. Senate. A tireless advocate for safety, Chair Homendy has spent over 2 decades supporting the critical mission of the NTSB, which investigates crashes in the transportation systems around the world. From 2004 to 2018, Chair Homendy served as the staff director for the Subcommittee on Railroads, Pipelines, and Hazardous Materials under the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. On a personal note, Chair Homendy, it's been such a delight to see the way you've changed the communication and advocacy for safety at NTSB. And you're always such a great speaker. It thrills me to be able to introduce you today, and we're looking forward to your comments.
Thank you so much, Paula. And those are incredibly kind words. And just thank you so much for your leadership as well. I really appreciate being here. I'm very excited about this event and certainly look forward to our discussion. And I do want to thank the Commonwealth Fund and of course the Mineta Transportation Institute for hosting today's event. And our discussion, I think, about the infrastructure law is really timely. Every day, new projects funded by the law break ground in communities across the country. At those events, and since it passed, public officials talk about the law as a historic investment in America. We hear a lot about the once-in-a-generation opportunity to make vital improvements, like advancing a greener future by reducing carbon emissions. And we also hear that the law will help maintain our nation's competitive international advantage by creating U.S. jobs, promoting equity, and modernizing our built environment, everything from broadband access to repairing our roads, bridges, and tunnels. These are all incredible goals, and I support every single one of them. But I am a little bit concerned. I did hear Robin talk about opportunity. I could not agree more. I just hope that everything that the infrastructure law has provided comes to fruition, which is why I am concerned. And I'm concerned because safety has been largely absent from the national conversation. It's become somewhat of an afterthought. And you mentioned I've been very focused and vocal about getting out NTSB's message and talking about road safety and safety across all modes of transportation. It's because I want to make sure that that doesn't get lost in the conversation. I do want to congratulate Secretary Buttigieg for his leadership on the National Roadway Safety Strategy, which I hope we implement fully, and for being the nation's first transportation secretary to call for 0 roadway deaths. Robin mentioned that, and I think that does matter. A lot of people who might be listening might think, oh, that's pie in the sky. Why are we calling for 0? I think it would be irresponsible for any Secretary of Transportation or any NTSB chair to call for, well, let's reduce 43,000 to 20,000. Those are 20,000 deaths that would still be occurring. 0 is the right number. So I am really pleased that the secretary, and I told him that and announcing the safety strategy. And so I am very pleased that DOT has gone in that direction. But I do fear that we risk missing this once in a generation opportunity to stem the outrageous, and it is outrageous, and it is a public health crisis on US roads. Now, you all who are listening might be wondering, how bad could it be? About 43,000 people died on our roads last year. 43,000 people. That's more than 117 people a day. Millions more people are injured annually. Black, brown, and indigenous road users die on our streets at much higher rates than white road users. And pedestrians die on our streets twice as often as other comparable nations. We know that 95% of US transportation deaths take place on our roads. It is the deadliest mode of transportation by far, and it's devastating, but it's also preventable. All roadway deaths are preventable. That's why the NTSB has long believed the only acceptable number of lives lost, as I mentioned, is 0. Now, what I do want to mention is that our approach to 0 isn't just in roadway safety. The NTSB is fighting to eliminate transportation deaths in all modes of transit, all modes. We're fighting for 0, whether a person is traveling by land, by sea, or by air, and everywhere in between. It is a big mission. If you're not familiar with the NTSB, we're a very small, 415 people and growing, but we're also a mighty federal agency of dedicated safety professionals. We're the people in blue windbreakers who you see on the news when something goes terribly wrong. We investigate aviation accidents and incidents, train derailments and collisions, marine incidents, vehicle crashes, pipeline ruptures, even commercial space mishaps. Our role is to investigate and determine how that tragedy or near miss happened. We then issue evidence-based recommendations. These are safety recommendations to prevent that tragedy from ever happening again. We make recommendations to anyone and everyone who needs to hear from us: state and local governments, companies, manufacturers, labor unions, even other federal agencies. We then advocate for our safety recommendations until they're enacted. Sometimes it takes years, other times it takes decades. We persist as long as it takes, and we never forget. We just closed a recommendation a few years ago that we worked on for 5 decades. So we never give up. One misconception I should address: the NTSB is not part of the US DOT. In fact, we're totally independent, and for good reason. The NTSB exists to hold everyone accountable when it comes to safety. That includes oversight of DOT and its modal agencies, which are frequent recipients of our safety recommendations because they have the authority to implement regulations. That includes the Federal Aviation Administration or the FMCSA, whose administrator you just heard from, Robin Hutchison. And I do want to take a moment on that note just to thank Robin for just her tremendous safety leadership, not just at FMCSA, including on speed limiters, which I will get to, but at DOT. She also was in the Secretary's office prior to being at FMCSA, and she really is an incredible partner in safety, and I'm really honored to be with her here with her today as well. So thank you, Robin. For everyone listening, think of the NTSB as the nation's investigator and transportation safety auditor. We all know that a reputable audit must come from an independent third party because it's hard, if not impossible, to demand accountability from the inside. And accountability matters, especially the people who've lost a loved one in a transportation tragedy. I often meet with these bereaved families, sometimes within hours or days of their loss. It is far and away the most difficult part of my role as NTSB chair. In these heartbreaking moments, I can only promise one thing, which is that the NTSB I will vigorously work to prevent similar suffering for other families. That's why I'm relentless in calling for transportation safety improvements. And I am pretty relentless. We talked a little bit, Paula mentioned advocacy. I'm very vocal on safety, especially on our roads where the need is so great. So the title of this event asks, is the infrastructure law up to the challenge of helping us get to 0 deaths on our roadways? Here's my answer. It's only part of the solution, and DOT can't do it alone. To get to zero, we need a total transformation in how we address the road safety crisis, or this public health crisis on our roads. That transformation is called the safe system approach, which the NTSB supports as a proven strategy to save lives. It encompasses everything that can save a life. Yes, the behaviors of people on the road, whether they're walking, driving, biking, or rolling, but also the vehicles on our roads, the speed at which those vehicles are allowed to travel, the physical road and infrastructure, including investment in transit. I like to call the safe roads component of the safe system approach safe infrastructure, because we do have to include transit, including rail, and even our readiness to respond when there is a crash. So the safe system approach is like the Swiss cheese model. It may be easy to see through the holes in one slice of cheese, but put a lot of slices together and there are no gaps. That's what we're talking about, building in redundancy in road safety to save lives. This is something we do very well in other modes of transportation, but not real well when it comes to road safety. And yet the infrastructure law largely addresses just one of those slices of cheese, which is our roads and infrastructure. Yes, transit, but I'll get to that. Now, don't get me wrong, that is a huge part of the solution. It is. We have to redesign for safety, and we need that investment, but it is just part of the answer. To be fair, the infrastructure law does require the DOT to enact many programs and policies that align with the safe system approach, but we're still struggling. Two recent examples come from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. The law requires NHTSA to strengthen the 5-star safety ratings program, which provides essential safety information to consumers and helps them make informed purchase decisions when it comes to new vehicles. Recall that safe vehicles are part of a safe system approach. Last week, the agency published a proposal to update the ratings program by including new pedestrian crashworthiness tests. NHTSA wants to measure how well vehicles protect people outside the vehicle when there's a crash. The NTSB has long supported such measures to save the lives of pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorcyclists, which is great. Yet the devil's in the details. So NHTSA is proposing that manufacturers voluntarily submit vehicle models for testing, verification, and scoring. And then they'll take that information and testing that occurs, and they'll post that data on their website. But studies show that nearly 2/3 of the public is unaware of their website. Now, when the proposal came out, I was actually in a dealership in the waiting room, and I asked other people who were also there, do you know who NHTSA is? I also told them who they were and what information they could get about safety recalls on their website, which is incredible information, but most don't. Instead, what we want NHTSA to do is develop performance test criteria for vehicle designs that reduce injuries to pedestrians, test pedestrian safety systems as part of the 5-star ratings program, and ensure the results are included on the window decal at the dealership, which can be easily seen by consumers purchasing new vehicles, and not just pedestrians, but also bicyclists. Here's a second example from earlier this week. NHTSA announced it was taking steps to address another mandate from the infrastructure law, which is fantastic, which is to require light vehicles to have automatic emergency braking and pedestrian AEB, automatic emergency braking systems. Again, that's something the NTSB has supported for decades. Actually, since 2001. But the proposal leaves out bicyclists and motorcyclists who are also dying at alarming rates. It's worth noting that Europe currently requires new vehicles to detect and avoid pedestrians and bicyclists. They're also testing AEB for motorcyclists. In other words, we're already behind, which is why I'm concerned about the deadlines in that proposal. They're much too long. and could extend out to 2029 for certain manufacturers, since the roadway safety strategy says that this rulemaking will be completed in 2024. So while the NHTSA's proposal doesn't address AEB for commercial motor vehicles, the National Roadway Safety Strategy does. So I am hopeful more action is forthcoming on commercial motor vehicles. I'm sure Robin will make sure of that. And of course, for bicyclists and motorcyclists. The infrastructure law also requires the US DOT to act on impaired driving technology, something the NTSB has supported for well over a decade. The deadline set in law is 3 years. We're already halfway there. Meanwhile, more than 13,000 people are dying from alcohol impaired driving every year. We cannot afford to wait, and we don't have to. The technology is available today that could eliminate impaired driving. The same goes for speeding, which contributes to 30% of all traffic deaths. Even though safe speeds is part of the safe system approach, the infrastructure law doesn't do much to address it. But we have a lot to say at the NTSB. We want to see speed limiting technology in all vehicles. This isn't just on DOT. This is on vehicle manufacturers. We should be demanding that. That's our recommendation. And we need to move away from this one-size-fits-all approach where states get to decide speed limits. Cities and local governments should be empowered to set their own speed limits because they know their community best. And we should modify federal guidance on how speeds are set in the first place. I'm talking about this 85th percentile approach, which is flawed and outdated and it's based on the speed of vehicles, not safety, and therefore leads to ever increasing speed limits across the US. And then there's what seems to be a contradiction in the infrastructure law. And this is something I've raised really since I spoke at the Transportation Research Board in January, and I have been raising the issue since. On one hand, the infrastructure law acknowledges that our roads, bridges, and tunnels are aging and in dire need of repair. On the other hand, the law incentivizes enormously heavy vehicles to travel on our aging infrastructure. And it is gas-powered vehicles and electric vehicles. Now, I'm going to raise the issue of electric vehicles because they tend to weigh more than their non-electric versions because of their batteries. That's true for the Mustang Mach-E, the Volvo XC40 EV, the Toyota RAV4 EV. They're all significantly heavier by about a third. Vehicle mass matters to the survivability of people involved in crashes. Safety experts have long cited this data, and everybody watching might recall this data and may have quoted it just like I have in the past. And it's from the AAA Foundation. When struck at an impact speed of 23 miles per hour, a pedestrian has a 90% chance of surviving. But at 58 miles per hour, that pedestrian has a 90% chance of dying. Well, that data is based on a study where the mean vehicle curb weight was 3,150 pounds, so about 3,100 pounds. That's about a third of what we're now seeing on our roads. So those numbers and the risk to pedestrians and cyclists and all those outside the vehicle and those that are driving lighter vehicles are so much greater. And, I often point to the GMC Hummer EV, which has a gross vehicle rating of about 10,000 pounds. The battery pack alone weighs about as much as a gas-powered Honda Civic. That has a significant impact on safety for all road users. Now, I want to take a moment to be clear. We do have a climate crisis that needs to be addressed. The U.S. transportation sector accounts for the largest portion of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, and I firmly believe it is a human right to breathe clean air. I also firmly believe we must achieve multiple goals simultaneously, that we must do it without creating unintended consequences, which in this case would be more death on our roads. So that leads me to the final reason I believe the infrastructure law alone isn't going to get us to zero. And that is because it perpetuates our nation's bias for cars. As the Brookings Institution puts it, the infrastructure law seeks to transform driving, not replace it. More people in more cars, regardless of fuel source or street design, will not get us to zero. We must do everything possible to get people on public transit, to give them alternative paths to destinations. It's greener, more affordable, more equitable, and it's safer by orders of magnitude. I'm encouraged that the law allocates billions of dollars for public transit. This is the kind of win-win solutions we need more of. And yet it's still only a fraction of the funding to electrify vehicles and modernize our roads. Before we open it up to discussion, I'll leave you with this. We must recognize this moment for what it is, a once-in-a-generation safety opportunity. And it's one we absolutely cannot let slip away. We cannot let the safe system approach and Vision Zero become taglines. We need to measure every single dollar of infrastructure funding distributed by DOT and the states by how well it prevents injury or death on our roads. That is the absolute minimum. We cannot pursue some goals at the expense of safety, no matter how laudable, and we certainly cannot ignore unintended consequences, no matter how well-intentioned our efforts may be. And we must hold everyone accountable for safety. DOT can't do it alone. No one can. They just had a call to action to encourage others to take action. That's another part of the safe system approach, the recognition that everyone shares responsibility for road safety, all stakeholders, governments at all levels, including the NTSB, vehicle and technology manufacturers, nonprofit and advocacy groups, researchers. We have academia here. It's not just your research, it's also your teaching the next generation of students who will be chairs of the NTSB, who will be the Secretary of Transportation, who will be the Robin Hutchison of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. And they have to continue to carry our safety message forward. Unless we all do our part, we'll never get to zero. Unless we all do our part, NTSB chairs will be meeting with bereaved families long after I'm gone. I won't accept that future, and neither will the NTSB. So thank you very much.
That's fantastic. I mentioned